This story is not for the weak-hearted. This story is about a man from the 1970s who loved drinking blood and eating human organs. His cannibalism filled terror in the hearts of the people of California while he was on his killing spree. This is the story of the Vampire Killer of Sacramento. Hello and welcome to Bizarre Cases. In today's video, we'll be talking about Richard Chase, the Vampire Killer of Sacramento, who killed 6 victims in a way not very different from that of an animal. Given his nickname, it doesn't come as much of a surprise that Richard Chase's trademark was drinking the blood of his victims after he killed them. Believe it or not, drinking his victims' blood wasn't even the vampire killer's most disturbing trait. Richard Chase showed signs of mental illness at a young age, but his father, a strict and sometimes physically abusive parent, did little to get him help. Chase was disturbed and unhappy as a child, and his symptoms grew worse in adolescence. He set several small fires, frequently wet the bed, and displayed signs of cruelty towards animals. These 3 habits are sometimes called the McDonald Triad, or the Triad of Sociopathy, proposed by psychiatrist J. M. McDonald in 1963 as a predictor of sociopathy in a patient. Chase's problems grew worse when his father allegedly kicked him out of the house. Without supervision, Chase turned to alcohol and drugs, which quickly turned into substance abuse. He became convinced on several occasions that his heart had stopped. At times, he thought he was a walking corpse. But being occasionally dead was no reason to neglect his health. Fearing that he lacked vitamin C, he reportedly pressed whole oranges to the skin of his forehead, believing that his brain would absorb the nutrients directly. One of his strangest and most powerful delusions involved his skull. He felt that his cranial bones had split apart and begun to shift beneath his skin, changing places and jumbling like puzzle pieces. He shaved his head in an effort to monitor their movements. Unsurprisingly, at the age of 25, Chase was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and institutionalized in 1975 to prevent him from becoming a danger to himself. His fascination with blood earned him the nickname Dracula among the psychiatric hospital's assistants, who witnessed him kill and attempt to drink the blood of several birds in an effort to stave off the effects of poison that was, he imagined, slowly turning his own blood to powder. It was his attempt to inject himself with rabbit's blood, which made him violently ill, that had resulted in his institutionalization. In spite of several similar incidents, the staff believed that they had rehabilitated Chase, and he was released to live with his mother. It was a fatal decision, as Chase's condition wasn't improving. He was growing worse. Though Richard Chase had been released into his mother's care, there was nothing legally binding that forced him to stay with her. Not long after his release from the psychiatric hospital, he moved out, later saying he thought his mother was poisoning him. He moved into an apartment he shared with a group of young men he called friends. But it seems they didn't know Chase well, and when he persisted in unusual behavior, notably drug abuse, that left him constantly high and a proclivity for walking around the apartment without any clothing, they asked him to leave. Richard Chase, however, refused, and it seemed the path of least resistance to his sometime roommates to abandon the apartment and find other lodgings. Chase was once again living on his own, a circumstance that almost always exacerbated the symptoms of his condition. His fascination with blood resurfaced, and he began capturing and killing small animals. He would eat them raw or blend their organs with soda and drink the mixture. In August of 1977, police found him late one night in the Lake Tahoe area, covered in blood and carrying a bucket with a liver in the back of his pickup. Since they determined the blood and organ belonged to a crow, not a human, they let Chase go. Yet again, Richard Chase slipped through the cracks in systems that could have helped him and protected others. As it was, alone, with no one to watch him or rein him in, he fell more deeply under the power of his delusions, until finally they prompted him to do the unthinkable. On December 29, 1977, Richard Chase was frustrated and lonely. His mother hadn't allowed him to come home for Christmas, he would later recall, and he was mad. Ambrose Griffin, a 51-year-old man who was helping his wife bring in groceries, became his first victim. While driving by their street, Chase pulled out a .22 caliber pistol and shot him in the chest. It was the beginning of an obsession. On January 11, 1978, Chase asked his neighbor for a cigarette and then forcibly restrained her until she gave him an entire pack. 2 weeks later, he attempted to enter the home of another woman, but finding that her doors were locked, went into her backyard and walked away. Chase later told detectives that he took locked doors as a sign that he was not welcome, but that unlocked doors were an invitation to come inside. While wandering around, he encountered a girl named Nancy Holden, with whom he attended high school. He attempted to get a ride from her, but frightened by his appearance, she refused. He went down the street where he broke into the home of a young married couple, stole some of their valuables, urinated into a drawer of their infant's clothing, and defecated on their son's bed. The couple came home while Chase was still in the house. The husband attacked him, but Chase escaped. Chase continued to enter homes until he came across the home of David and Teresa Wallen. David was at work. Teresa, 3 months pregnant, was in the middle of taking out the garbage, and thus had left her front door unlocked. Chase surprised her in the home and shot her 3 times, once in the hand, a defensive wound, and twice in the head, killing her. It was the same gun used to kill Ambrose Griffin. Chase then dragged her body to a bedroom and raped it post-mortem while repeatedly stabbing with a butcher knife. When he had finished, he carved the corpse open and removed several of her internal organs, using a bucket to collect the blood, and then taking it in the bathroom to bathe in it. He then sliced off her nipple and drank her blood, using an empty yogurt container as a drinking glass. Before leaving, he went into the yard, found a pile of dog feces, and returned to stuff it into the corpse's mouth and throat. On January 23, 1978, 2 days after killing Teresa Wallen, Chase purchased 2 puppies from a neighbor, which he then killed and drank the blood of, leaving the bodies on the neighbor's front lawn. On January 27th, Chase committed his final murder, which also qualifies as a mass murder. He entered the home of 38-year-old Evelyn Miroth, who was babysitting her 22-month-old nephew, David. Also present in the room was Evelyn's 6-year-old son, Jason, and Dan Meredith, a neighbor who had come over to check on Evelyn. Evelyn was in the bath while Dan watched the children. He went into the front hallway when Chase entered the home and was shot in the head at point-blank range with Chase's .22 caliber handgun, killing him. Again, this was the same gun used in the Griffin and Wallen murders. Chase then turned the corpse over and stole Dan's wallet and car keys. Jason ran to his mother's bedroom, where Chase fatally shot him twice in the head at point-blank range. On the way to killing Jason, Chase also shot David in the head. Chase then entered the bathroom and fatally shot Evelyn once in the head. He dragged her corpse onto the bed, where he simultaneously sodomized it and drank its blood from a series of slices to the back of the neck. Medical examiners reported an inordinate amount of semen, indicating an unusual amount of ejaculation. When Chase had finished, he stabbed her at least half a dozen times, the knife penetrating her. He stabbed her in a series of vital points on the body, which caused blood from her internal organs to pool into her abdomen, which he then sliced open and drained into a bucket. He then consumed all of the blood. Chase then went to retrieve David's corpse. He took it to the bathroom and split its skull open in the bathtub and consumed some of the brain matter. Outside, a 6-year-old girl with whom Jason Miroth had a playdate knocked on the door, startling Chase. He fled the residence, stealing Dan Meredith's car. The girl alerted a neighbor. The neighbor broke into the Miroth home where he discovered the bodies and contacted the authorities. Upon entering the home, the police discovered that Chase had left perfect handprints and perfect imprints of the soles of his shoes in Evelyn's blood. Chase, meanwhile, took David's corpse home with him, where he chopped off his penis and used it as a straw, through which he sucked the blood out of the body. He then sliced the corpse open and consumed several internal organs, and made smoothies out of the others, finally disposing of the corpse at a nearby church. After the Wallen murder, FBI agents Russ Vorpagel and Robert Ressler were called in to investigate. They compiled a profile of the killer. They determined that the killer would be tall, malnourished, a loner, physically unclean, and that most importantly, he would continue to kill. 5 days after the mass murder, and after hearing the FBI profile, Nancy Holden contacted police, saying she believed Richard Chase could be the killer. The police ran a background check on Chase, where they came across his registration of a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. Detectives and a team of police went to Chase's apartment, where they asked to speak with him. Chase refused. The detectives and the police hid down the hallway and waited for Chase to leave, arresting him when he left the apartment carrying a blood-stained box. His parka and shoes were likewise blood-stained. Inside were pieces of shredded, blood-soaked paper and the blood-stained .22 with which he had committed his murders. Chase claimed that the bloody wallpaper and bloody gun were a result of his killing several dogs. When the police performed a search of Chase's person, they found that he was carrying Dan Meredith's wallet. Detectives, along with Ressler and Vorpagel, performed a search of Chase's apartment. They found the walls, floor, ceiling, refrigerator, and all of Chase's eating and drinking utensils soaked in blood. On the counter was the blender Chase used to make his smoothies. It was caked in coagulated blood and the rotting matter of internal organs. Inside the refrigerator, police found several animal body parts wrapped in aluminum foil, David's brains in a Tupperware container, and pieces of his body wrapped in saran wrap, and several of Evelyn Miroth's and Teresa Wallen's internal organs. On another counter were several pet collars. On his kitchen table, he had spread out numerous diagrams depicting various aspects of human biology. In 1979, Chase stood trial on 6 counts of murder. In order to avoid the death penalty, the defense tried to have Chase found guilty of second-degree murder, which would have resulted in a life sentence. Their case hinged on Chase's history of mental illness and the lack of planning in his crimes, evidence that they were not premeditated. On May 8th, the jury found Chase guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder. The defense asked for a clemency hearing, in which a judge determined that Chase was not legally insane. Chase was sentenced to die in the gas chamber. Waiting to die, Chase became a feared presence in prison. The other inmates, including several gang members, aware of the graphic and bizarre nature of his crimes, feared him, and according to prison officials, they often tried to convince Chase to commit suicide, too fearful to get close enough to him to kill him themselves. Chase also granted a series of interviews with Robert Ressler, during which he spoke of his fears of Nazis and UFOs, claiming that although he had killed, it was not his fault. He had been forced to kill to keep himself alive, which he believed any person would do. He asked Ressler to give him access to a radar gun, with which he could apprehend the Nazi UFOs, so that the Nazis could stand trial for the murders. He also handed Ressler a large amount of macaroni and cheese, which he had been hoarding in his pants pockets, believing that the prison officials were in league with the Nazis and attempting to kill him. On December 26, 1980, a guard doing cell checks found Chase lying awkwardly on his bed, not breathing. An autopsy determined that Chase committed suicide with an overdose of prison doctor-described antidepressants that he had been saving up for the last few weeks. The 1988 movie Rampage was loosely based on Chase's crimes. What are your views on this video? Do you think the victims of the Vampire Killer deserve justice a better way? How do you think Richard Chase should be punished? Let us know your views in the comments section below. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked our efforts in the research of this video, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so that you never miss out on our content. Catch you in the next video.